All right, so like I said, I wanted to thank American Floral Endowment, in particular Laura, for making the arrangements, and then sending florists with Mateo. A lot of work goes into putting these things together. So many emails, so thank you all. And the other thing I want to say is that coming to Proflora just rejuvenates me. I mean, I can look out the window here and see all of these gorgeous flowers, which helps to remind us why we do what we do and the beauty that we spread around the world. So what I am going to talk about today is integrating AI and technology into cut flower production. And let me start by saying that, that I am not an engineer, okay? I'm a horticulturist, a plant physiologist. So I am approaching this topic very much like all of you, in that I am looking to see what these technologies can do for cut flowers and what these technologies can do for me. All right, so I'm going to cover 4 topics here this morning. First is to look at the technology and hardware trends that are occurring in agriculture, some of which apply very directly to floriculture, cut flowers, and some not so much. Then we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. Then we're going to talk about combining AI and hardware. That section will be short, but in some ways, that section is going to be the most important in the next few years when the software and the hardware really come together. And then finally, we're going to talk about the research project that we have at North Carolina State University. All right, the first part here, talking about the trends in agriculture, agrivoltaics. A lot of discussion in the United States and in many areas of the world. We are now seeing many solar farms being put up. And in the United States, many times they are being put on land that had been used for farming. So the concern is that we're taking farmland and converting it to solar collection. So companies and researchers are looking at how to combine the two together. You know, one option is to raise the solar panels up. That's very expensive, but there's some excellent work being done that shows in some situations you can increase the production of the crop below by the shade that comes from the solar panels. More important to floriculture is that we're seeing there are companies working on incorporating solar collection right into the shade fabrics, because we do shade our greenhouses. You know, sometimes we put liquid shade on, sometimes we use shading fabric. That'll be very exciting when we get to that point. If we can close the shade cloth, we will be generating electricity. With especially greenhouses here in the savanna, if you could combine that solar collection incorporated in with heat pumps, we would be very close to having an energy neutral greenhouse, which would be very big for sustainability. Controlled environment. How many have heard in the news about controlled environment, CEA? All right. There's been a lot of discussion on that, and in general, we're already doing that. Greenhouses are a controlled environment. What we're seeing, though, is that some folks are looking at totally bringing production into an environment without light transmission. The idea here is to really be able to control the environment to exclude pests and diseases, like we heard about this morning. Also, in many parts of the world, the climate's not as nice as here. You know, the savanna is very uniform, relatively speaking. Well, in the United States, we have a lot of heat, we have a lot of cold, and that, is a lot of stress on the plants and a lot of energy. The idea is to bring it in. I will say at this point, there is more discussion than there is actual practicality on this, so we will see where it all goes. But even in the field, we're seeing a move towards putting crops under tunnels. If you travel in many parts of Spain, California, even in Chile and Peru, you see what was normally field crops being grown under cover to improve the quality. Now, of course, here in floriculture, we've been doing this for a while in the bouquet making part of this, but what is changing are the work being done on robots for harvesting flowers. Okay, actually going out into the greenhouse and harvesting the flowers. I'm not aware of too much implementation yet. I believe that there is one firm in Canada that is using some robots already. So, but coming, a lot of folks are working on this. Pest management. Now, I will say right off the beginning that the example I'm showing is a field crop. This is lettuce in particular here. There's two machines, which I just happened to see about a month ago. The one up top there uses knives. Okay, it goes along the row, and then whenever it detects a weed, a knife comes out and cuts it off just below the soil surface. The one down below here uses lasers to zap the weeds, okay? And if you look at the pictures here, it might be a little hard to see in the back. Here is a clean lettuce field, and here is a field with small weeds, okay? Now, you're not going to be able to use these machines in the greenhouses or in the floriculture. We grow things differently. But what is very cool about this is not only one, that it's happening, but that as the machines roll over the crop, they're taking photographs and they're recording the development of the crop. And this is where we will see big changes in agriculture. All right, data collection. We already do a lot of data collection in cut flower production. You know, we put the small sensors into boxes that we ship. Of course, we collect temperatures in the greenhouse, the cooler, the processing areas. But what we're going to see more and more are going to be the use of drones. Mostly now they're being used in the field, but for detecting the presence of disease, plant disorders, water stress. What's very interesting is that depending on the camera that's on the drones often are better at detecting diseases and other problems before the human eye can, okay? And that's going to make us much more efficient at detecting these problems. Drones are being used to conduct inventory assessment, you know, what actually is in the field in terms of what can be harvested, monitoring plant growth and development. Once we can do that, then we can take the next step, which is to predict the harvest. The first time I came to Colombia was in 2005. That was a topic of conversation then. How can we better predict when we can harvest our flowers to meet our sales? Okay, it's 20 years later, it is still a major issue. Conduct environmental monitoring, support marketing. How many times have we seen ads or commercials for companies where we see the drone, you know, the drone swoops down over and does this beautiful view of the farm, you know, so a lot of drones being used in marketing. It's not just data collection. There are companies working on developing drones that can apply the shading compound to greenhouses, okay? And probably most exciting will be the use of drones in pesticide applications. I mean, even in the Bogota area here with your lovely climate, you know, dressing up in the suits, it gets hot, it gets uncomfortable. And I'm sure many folks would love to be able to figure out how to do that, how to apply pesticides with using drones. So there are some issues. Greenhouses are kind of a tough environment for drones. In particular in the United States, because we have greenhouses with lots of supports. Okay, we have hurricanes where I live, so we have to build very strong greenhouses with lots of posts and purlins and trusses, where here you don't have hurricanes. Your greenhouses are much more open, so they're much easier to fly drones in. Also in the north, we have a lot of snow. So again, the greenhouses have to be built. All of that metal interferes with the drones working, not only physically, but also with the signals being transmitted. But I do think drones would fit more easily into your more open greenhouses here in the savanna. The drones are being made automated, so they, you know, right now, most of the time somebody has to fly them, but they're now being developed so that they will lift up go on a set pattern, then come back to their base, they recharge, they download the data, and then they do another run, making it completely automated. One of the biggest challenges, which before I started this project, I was somewhat aware, but I'm really aware of now, is the huge volumes of data. We do one simple experiment and we generate enough data that it took over an hour to download it. And if you think of, that's, yeah. So managing that data, anybody getting into this, be aware of the data. All right, I think in some cases, and in many situations, fixed cameras are going to be more applicable. The cost of visible light cameras has gone way down. And it'll probably be easier in many of our greenhouses just to simply put a row of these cameras. It'll be cheaper and easier to maintain. And so that's where I think some of this will go, especially cameras being used for inventory management, maybe plant growth modeling, because that uses, for the most part, visible, what we can see. There are other types of cameras, near infrared, thermal, multispectral, and hyperspectral we'll talk about in a minute. The cost goes up the further down on the list you go. Okay, so visible light cameras right now are very inexpensive. We will see as technology develops whether the cost of the other cameras go down. But for example, multispectral analysis at this point will probably need to use a drone because of the cost of the camera. All right, automation challenges. These machines cost a lot of money. The drones are getting less expensive, but the cameras on them, depending on what kind of camera you use, can be expensive. Large operations can buy this directly, but what about all the rest? What we're seeing is a couple different options. In like California, for example, smaller companies are working together to buy machines that they then cooperate with, they share. The other is pay for service. So a company is set up, buys the machines, and then basically rents it out. The folks who are building these machines say their top market is going to be the large operations that can pay for the machines directly. Then as that market is saturated, they will start working down into these other sections. So for medium to small operations, it may be a while before we get, before we're able to use some of these in the greenhouse. Employees to operate this technology. Used to joke around, my students are now much better at doing some of this stuff, of course, than I, but even them, they have to be trained. So it's not always the easiest to find folks that can do this stuff. And the other thing that has always been a problem with implementing technology in our industry is the broad range of crops that we grow. It's a big difference from a field of lettuce to a greenhouse with all the different crops and then all the different SKUs. It's not just that we grow red roses, it's just that we've got 25 stem wholesale bunches. We've got 3, 5, and 10 stem consumer bunches. All the different ways that we sell the same product really makes it difficult to implement technology. All right, moving on to the next part here, artificial intelligence. This was one of the topics folks, they asked me to address. Very cool. I'm going to do a little terminology first. Artificial intelligence is a broad term. We see it a lot in the news. It's basically just software that can do what normally requires the intelligence of a human to do. Okay, so it's very broad. Machine learning is more of a technical term. It's a subsection of AI where algorithms can take data and look at patterns. And the pattern that I think we want to do the most is being able to predict harvests, okay? Being able to look at previous harvesting data and then to be able to use that to predict what we're going to harvest in the future, okay? And deep learning is a subset of that even, which uses multiple algorithms together. Okay, a model is any program that makes predictions after being trained. Training is feeding that model data. And that is one of the things that's going to take some time to get a model that can really tell us when our roses will be ready. We have to give it a lot of data, okay, to be able to do it accurately. If we don't give it much data, we're not going to get a very useful model. The data set, of course, is the data we use, the prompt. Now, this is one of the fun things with artificial intelligence is that we can use normal language, all right? Statistically, we can do some of this stuff already, but it takes a long time and you have to use very specific statistical terms. What we can do now in some cases, and what we will be able to do is say, can you tell me how many boxes of Freedom Red Roses we can plan for on week 32? And just write that out. That's one of the big changes that we're going to see to make it so much easier to use. And then we get to the last part here, okay? This is interesting. I've worked with it enough now. I've seen very clear examples where the artificial intelligence gives me completely wrong information, but it says it so confidently that it just seems like it should be right. Okay, now if I ask it a question on roses and it gives me the wrong information, I can figure that out. But if I ask it a question on, what sort of lens do I want to use in my camera, like I said, I'm not an engineer. That's harder for me to tell that it's absolutely wrong. We're going to talk a little bit about how to deal with that here in a minute. Okay, these models I've mentioned, the most common, how many have heard of ChatGPT? All right, yes, it's in the news. I use Copilot actually, which I don't actually have on there. Claude and Gemini is another one. There's also, large language models use written text for the most part, okay? But there's also models that use vision. There's also models that use speech and audio. And then of course, all of these can be combined together. Wanted to put in, kind of give you an idea of where we are at with artificial intelligence. Right now, the situation is very similar to when the internet was developed. Okay, now I know I'm really dating myself because I remember this, okay? And how many of you would like to join me in saying you remember before the internet? All right, some of you need to raise your hands because I know that you were here before. All right, so the very similar situation. The internet was developed, the World Wide Web, which connected all these computers together. And then we started, well, I didn't, but folks started developing all these programs that used that internet, okay? We have we've got these large language models available now, and we're using them in simple situations. What's really going to be interesting is all the programs that are going to come that are going to use those models, and hopefully in ways that are going to be very useful to us. All right, so using it, there's a number of them available. ChatGPT is probably the most well-known. Like I said, I use Copilot. A couple of cautions. One is that if you use the free online one, it uses data that is publicly available and a little old. And keep in mind, if you put anything in, then it can get used as well by others. So keep that in mind. All right, be specific with the instructions. And think of it right now like you do a Google search. Sometimes you put something in, you don't get what you want, so you change it around. It's no different here. But you can use sentences and just regular conversational sentences rather than specific terms. I like to tell it to list the sources it got the information from, especially when I'm asking it something that I'm not that familiar with, because then I can check those sources to make sure it's not making something up, okay? In-depth Google searches. How many times have you tried to find something in Google and put in multiple terms and clicked on multiple websites trying to find things? What you can do now is just go into one of these, put in your sentence, your question, and then make it much more efficient. First drafts of non-technical content. I will tell you that when I ask it to put together a production system for roses, it can't do that, okay? It confuses garden roses with cut flower roses and gives us a lot of nonsense, okay? So Non-technical is best so far. I've got a friend that uses it a lot to edit her first drafts. She will write something and then tell ChatGPT to edit it for her. Analyze and visualize data. This is what we're working on with one grower right now in North Carolina, trying to improve their efficiency of how they're planting. The other thing I will add is for larger companies in particular, developing your own chatbots. The American Floral Endowment have Professor Petal, the ASCFG, the Cut Flower Association has a Marigold, American Hort has Sage. These are all tools that their members can use to find information. There is software available for you to do the same thing. Think about how much time you spend answering customers' questions. If you have a large operation with a lot of employees, think about how much time your administration folks spend answering questions on stuff, HR, pay, and all these different things. All of this can be put into one of these programs, and you can create your own chat box. The cost and the difficulty of setting these up has gotten the cost has gone down, and these have gotten much easier to set up. So some of the larger companies, you may want to look at developing your own chat box to support your customers and or your employees. One thing you will need, you have to have all your stuff in a digital form for it to recognize it. And it is surprising how much stuff, one, we don't write down, okay? It's just always been. This is the way we do it. So to use this, you have to write it down. And two, how much stuff still is in paper form, or posted on the wall. So you got to take all this stuff and put it into digital form. All right, the next part here is going to be short. I mentioned this already. These machines, we're developing machines, well, not we, but the companies are developing machines for specific purposes. But the data that they're collecting can be used in multiple ways. And that's what I think is really going to be exciting, is if we have drones that are looking for pests, those same drones can then also do inventory prediction models and those sorts of things. We are quite a ways away from having a completely automated greenhouse. Wageningen has been doing an autonomous greenhouse challenge, where they invite, every 2 years, they invite 5 teams to produce a crop in a greenhouse in the Netherlands. These teams are from all over the world. The teams provide the machine learning and algorithms to grow the crop. The Wageningen provides the crop, the chamber. And I was on a webinar the other day with one of the folks from Wageningen who's running this, and they said we are quite a ways away from a completely automated greenhouse. But every time they run this challenge, things get more and more efficient and more and more effective. Their goal in doing this is to maximize production while minimizing inputs. Isn't that what we're trying to do all the time in our greenhouses? All right. Last part here is to go through the research project here at NC State. And I want to start with the folks who are doing the project. In particular, Tatiana Osorio Montoya. She's my PhD student. She's running the project. She is Colombiana. She is from Medellin. She's doing a really wonderful job. Our first 2 cooperators were Weilong He and Lirong Jiang in the Department of Biological Engineering. You're going to see some of the images that they generated for us. Abby Norton, undergraduate student, who's just done a really great job supporting us. And Jiying Zhang, who's in our department and has been helping us with the hyperspectral analysis. And then I want to thank the folks from Jardines de los Andes, Geronimo Herrera and Mabel Garcia. Where's Mabel? I know she was here, helping us with the flowers and providing just excellent, excellent flowers to work with. And then Michael and Uma on the botrytis side, helping us with these 2 folks are in the plant pathology department. All right, so high quality flowers with a long vase life. They need to be well hydrated. They need to contain sufficient sugar reserves. That sugar can either come from photosynthesis, which is the best, or it can come from the flower foods we provide, which are necessary as well. And then they need to be free from disease. We just had a great presentation on botrytis, and so think about that in particular. In doing this, we can be sure that flowers have a long storage and vase life. We can reduce waste. If more of the flowers get to the customer, that reduces waste and that improves profitability. And of course, it increases sustainability. Right now, we use a lot of assessment tools, and most of it is people. We do visual assessments in the field. When the harvesters are cutting, they don't cut every flower. They may cut them and then throw them down to be cleaned up off of the pathway, okay? And only some of the flowers. That's an assessment already. That's the very first assessment that is taking place, are what the harvesters are doing. And then we assess them in the processing area. We might use humidity chambers, such as here, to determine botrytis status. There's some issues with this. First of all, it's subjective. One harvester might look at a flower differently than the next. Okay, sometimes not accurate. We miss things. And then, in particular with the botrytis testing, we're not going to get those results until after the flowers are shipped. We can use lab methods to do the same. There's various, chromatography, enzymatic assays, PCR. All of this is very effective, but time-consuming, costly, and again, impractical in a commercial greenhouse. So what we're looking to develop is real-time assessment methods using hyper and multispectral analysis. This is non-destructive, okay? We'll explain the process here in a bit, but it determines the state of the plant material by using reflected light. We illuminate, and then the light that's reflected back gives us information. All right, so the two methods we're going to talk about are hyperspectral analysis and multispectral analysis. Very similar. The hyperspectral is a camera that looks at all the wavelengths in a range. Generally, it's around 400 to 1,000 is what we were first doing, but it can go up to 2,500 nanometers, okay? And it gives us a curve like this. Multispectral analysis uses only certain wavelengths. It might use just 5, okay? And so it's much faster. Hyperspectral analysis can detect texture, starch content, water levels, diseases, okay? Pigment concentration, ripeness, in particular with fruit. It produces a lot of data. I mentioned earlier, handling data. One simple experiment can generate large volumes. It's slow. It seems very fast, but it is not something that can be done with a lot of flowers at once, okay? And it's expensive. The cameras right now are close to $50,000. Multispectral analysis is faster, cheaper, and really ideal for real-time use, okay? But we have to know what wavelengths to use to specifically provide. So we are using hyperspectral analysis to determine which wavelengths will work, and then use multispectral analysis to develop a method to do this in a commercial greenhouse. Now, I would love to say we were the first ones to think of this. We're not, okay? As most things in science, somebody else has done something before us. So this is one project from China. They were looking at strawberry diseases, and they detected anthracnose and gray mold using specific wavelengths. And most of those, well, some of those are visible light and some of those are infrared light. But what was very, very cool in this particular work, they were able to detect botrytis 24 hours before the symptoms were visible. Okay, that would be huge. In this particular study in Korea, they skipped over the middle part. They went right to, they scanned the flowers, and then they developed models that correlated it with vase life. Okay, they looked at some of the stress, they stressed the flowers in different ways, and then put all of this information in and developed a system for predicting the vase life. Ultimately, that's what we wanted to do as well. And but we're going to do it in two parts, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. They found that 470 to 680 was strongly linked to botrytis, and that 700 to 900 nanometers, which is more on the infrared side, was linked to plant stress. So what we're planning to do is determine water carbohydrate disease status, then developing a monitoring system that uses that, and then developing real-time commercially viable assessments. We want to do this to make sure that all the flowers going out are going to have a long vase life for our customers. Okay, we've done 3 experiments to date. Well, actually 4, but I'm just going to show 3. In the first one here, we subjected flowers. Well, actually, Jardines de los Andes and Mabel did this, so thank you. They treated the flowers different ways. One, the flowers were kept completely dry from harvest until we received them. In this particular treatment, they were harvested. These first 2 treatments got no additional carbohydrates. So just the carbohydrates that were in the flowers. And then the last one here was hydration with additional carbohydrates. We did an alstroemeria, chrysanthemum, and rose, 2 cultivars of each. And here you can see the scans, okay, with alstroemeria, chrysanthemum, and rose. This was our old scanning. We now have a newer one that can do the full stem. And one of the things we had to do, we have to tell the software what it's looking at, because it doesn't know. So we have to tell it what's the flower, what's the stem, what's the upper surface of the leaf, and what's the lower surface of the leaf. We don't know yet what's going to be the most important part for predicting. So we have to tell it all of it. And then these are the scans that we get. And we were able to detect difference with the different treatments. So we could pull out which stems were dry, which stems were wet, and which stems had carbohydrates. So the system is working in that regard. On the next experiment, you'll notice in the first one, I didn't say anything about botrytis, and botrytis is so important. So in the next experiment, the folks at Jardines de los Andes, they sent us flowers that were treated or were not treated with fungicides. And again, we looked at roses, Freedom and Orange Crush being more susceptible. This is the development on Freedom. Okay, you can see all the way to, really nasty there, letter H. That's a scientific term, by the way. What we're hoping to find, and we did this not too long ago, so we're still analyzing the data, but like A, well, let's look at B. That's before a lot of visible symptoms were there. So we're trying to find out if we can detect botrytis. The other thing is, as I mentioned before, with this work, you have to provide it a lot of information. Okay, we have to train the model and tell it what it's looking at. So part of that is telling it when a flower is not good. So all the different ways roses die, we have to tell the model, we have to show the model what that means and that those are bad. So this is all the different things, the necrosis, bent neck, physical damage, letter G there. Okay, and the next one here, we're looking at botrytis. We gave them different rates of inoculum. That is where Michael, Bradshaw, and Uma, they grew up botrytis spores. We applied them to the flowers at different rates to see how fast it would infect the flowers. And we've got different curves here. You can notice the pink, the lowest one there. There was no disease on untreated flowers for Freedom Red, but Orange Crush had a little bit. Orange Crush tends to be more sensitive to botrytis, and that the 2 middle curves were the best. Again, we're trying to look at the early part of those curves as to can we detect the botrytis even before it's visible to us. And then here just photos showing the development of the disease after we sprayed the botrytis on the flowers. And I know you all have seen lots of botrytis on flowers, so this is nothing new. But this is the kind of stuff we have to train the model with. We have to tell it what is botrytis. All right, some of the challenges, a lot of factors to consider with this. Variability among plant parts. For example, we're thinking it's probably going to be the leaf. We don't know if it's going to be the upper side or the lower side of the leaf that's going to be most useful in this process. There's variability among flower species. We've started with 4, but we can just walk around the show here and see dozens and dozens, okay? So what we are starting, we're focusing a lot on the main species and then going from there. Variability among environmental factors, okay? Some of this we want. We want to know if one of our greenhouses is too hot and the flowers are respiring away carbohydrates, and then the vase life will be short. We want to know that to be able to detect those flowers. But yet we also get a lot of day-to-day variation that we hope that we want the model to not be able to detect. So a lot of complex data analysis. Tatiana's got her work cut out for her. All right, so again, to summarize, we're looking at specific wavelengths correlated with hydration, sugar, and disease status, using machine learning to take all of this information and tell us when the flowers will have a long vase life and when they won't, and then putting this together into a system, visiting Jardines de los Andes on Tuesday, looking at their processing, and where could this be easily put in to be effective on the farm. It's great to do it in the lab, but it means nothing until we can get it on the farm. Okay.
Si ustedes tienen alguna pregunta.